Well, welcome. Thank you for coming. This is our End of Life Matters discussion. Every 2 weeks, we have a presentation or we facilitate a discussion on end of life care. So this is kind of our perspective, is that caregiving and personal spiritual development go hand in hand. You know, just think about what we use to help others or to care for others is our consciousness. So how can consciousness not be something that we really focus on if we're actually using it as a tool, as an instrument to help others? So we think that spiritual development and caregiving are one. They should be one. You know, because that's what we bring, is our own consciousness. So for that reason, we look at this book called the Bhagavad-gita. Anyone not familiar with the Bhagavad-gita? You're familiar? Yeah.
Of course. I've never read it.
Yeah. Okay. So there are certain teachings that can be very informative, that can be very helpful from the Bhagavad-gita that help us to understand caregiving. And so I entitled this "At the Time of Death," because that's a term that's used in the Bhagavad-gita. Again and again, there's this term. If you look here, prayana kale, picha mam te vidur yukta chetasa. Krishna tells Arjuna, with your consciousness linked to me, know me at the time of death. So Arjuna, when he hears that, it kind of catches his attention, and he asks questions about that, what that means, and how do you do that. I was just hearing the other day, you know, formerly in these old times in India, the Vedic times, they used, you know how we ask each other when we see each other, we have a greeting, we say, how are you, what's new, how's it going? You know how they used to greet each other? It's very interesting. They say, Punar Jarma Jayaya, which means, it kind of means this, it means, how are you overcoming death? How's that going? Overcoming death. Imagine greeting somebody that way. How's the task of overcoming death? How's that going for you? And they used to actually greet each other that way. So they would inquire into how's that process going of overcoming death. It's a powerful culture, right? Imagine that was the question to greet somebody. So everyone understood that this was the task in life, is to learn how to face death. Because by facing death, you can truly live. So it's amazing that I was reading this in a book of this is how a king was greeting a sage when he saw him. How's that process going of facing death? And then he would give a response. You know, so the Gita also talks about this, how to face death and how to know. Krishna says to know me at the time of death. And so when Arjuna hears that term, knowing him at the time of death, he has these questions that come up. And they say that the student and the teacher, there should be a friction in that relationship. What do you think that friction is? For truth to arise or to awaken, there has to be a kind of friction between the student and the teacher. What do you think that might be? What is that friction?
Well.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, right.
Yes. Oh, I'd rather not be. Well, the friction would be all the questions.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
No.
I think I can speak loudly.
Yeah. The friction mostly is coming from the student.
The question.
The burning question. You know, we can go around giving a spiritual advice to people and they won't care, but if someone really wants to know and understand that burning question, then that creates a kind of friction where there's a back and forth between the teacher and the student, and then from that, there can be enlightenment. That's why they give the example of 2 sticks. If you have 2 sticks and the friction, it produces fire.
Right. Oh, nice.
So that's the example that's given in the Upanishad. So the 2 sticks are like the teacher and the student, and it goes back and forth, there's a friction, and finally something new comes, fire comes from that exchange.
So,
yeah.
let me just ask, these are stories, you're talking about a particular section of the Gita?
Yes, the 8th chapter.
Which is kind of a certain kind of Bible which you learn from these stories?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there are teachings in this 8th chapter, especially about the time of death, and that's why we're using this chapter as a...
Okay.
So when Arjuna asks about what this means, knowing Krishna at the time of death, then Krishna responds by talking about consciousness. So if you see the sheet here, consciousness. And this is a famous verse which translated into English, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. Whatever our consciousness, what's our consciousness at the time of death? It's whatever we've cultivated throughout our life. That's there with us, and that determines the next state. So it's a really simple but powerful point that our consciousness determines our experiences in life and also what happens to us at death. Right? So we all have a particular form of life that's different. We have different experiences, different events that come into our life, losses, failures, disappointments, happiness. It's different for each person. And all of that is determined by the consciousness that we've cultivated.
Are you saying that our experiences are a reflection of our state of consciousness?
Yes.
So you're saying then what the Gita is saying, which is a lot of modern day spiritualists are saying, that we are creating our reality.
Yeah. This is a way of seeing karma. What does karma mean? Karma is self-produced. So we create a certain consciousness, and then we draw certain things into our life because of that consciousness.
Can we change it even if it's karma?
Yes.
Is that by the chanting?
Well, that's what we'll get into next.
But then you have to be at a certain level, because if it's a bad day or a bad week, somebody's very ill, you're taking, then maybe your consciousness isn't so good.
Right. So how to face those situations where we're actually changing and we're elevating our that's the question, because suffering is going to come. And we may have produced it in some way, but now how do we face it where we can make a change where suffering doesn't have to come in the same way? That's the big question.
So they say that it's what we do with the suffering.
Yeah.
Right?
So the event or the circumstance may be my karma, but now how do I respond to it?
Right.
That can determine everything. That will change everything. It's so powerful, right? This simple point, because even though we know it intellectually, we can see we don't really live by it, because as soon as something comes into my life that I don't like, what do? I complain, I point to the cause outside of myself. I blame, and all that shows that we don't really embrace this point. Because if we really embrace this point, there would be no victim consciousness. We'd say, okay, somehow I've produced this. Maybe I don't know how or why.
Even if someone attacks you
Somehow, something, what's the lesson here for me in this, even though it's painful and difficult, right? It's tough. And
But what if you're taking care of somebody who's sick?
Yeah.
That you didn't cause the illness, but you have to react and take care
Yeah,
of
again,
them.
responding in a certain consciousness will make all the difference. And what is that
To
consciousness?
you
And to the
sick
person. Yeah, you can be of service. Yeah.
But even if someone's in your life that's attacking you,
Yeah.
it's part of the karma, and how you respond to it.
Is everything. How you respond to it will change it if we can respond in a certain consciousness. Otherwise, if we just blame, it's the problem's not dealt with and it will come again.
What if we tell them to stop, that it's wrong?
Tell who to stop?
Whoever's doing
Attacking you?
attacking
Well, yeah, sure. We still have to take care of whatever we have to do, right? Hi. No, thank you. Thank you for coming. Oh, no, so sorry. Please take a sheet. We're looking at this little outline here. Welcome. Let's see.
So you're going to address how you get to this level that you can live your life without being a victim all the time.
Yeah, this is the big lesson from the Gita. But just think for a minute, if you really accepted this point, that whatever's coming into my life, I'm drawing it in because of my consciousness. So if you really believe that and accept that, then how would you respond? What's a healthy way to respond when difficulties come? Sorry? Relax. Yeah. Relax.
See, that's hard for me to accept, that whatever comes into
I know.
my life.
All of us.
But what's not hard for me to accept is if you chant and do some other things, you will handle it differently.
Okay.
I could believe part two.
Okay.
But if something's a trigger or is causing danger to your children or something like that, it's very hard to stay non-reactive.
Well, it doesn't mean you don't do anything on that level, but still to have this deeper understanding that consciousness is producing experiences. So like it's not that you say, oh, well then I'm just passive and I'll let whatever happen happen. No, you have to take care of it on the material level even. But still to have this understanding of how and why things are happening this way is deep wisdom that really determines the change that we want. You know, we want to change externally, and then we may make a change externally, but that deep, for it to really be a sustained deep change, we know it has to come from the internal place. Because you make a change externally, and it always just comes back around again. You know, like whenever there's war, we have some idea for peace, and we put it out there. But then it's just a matter of time before war comes again, and then peace and war. There's a cycle that keeps going until there's an internal change. Until the
change is really
internal. Yeah.
But different, for example, if you are in a workplace and you have a horrible boss,
Yeah.
and he or she walks around in a horrible mood, it influences everyone.
Yeah.
And then, let's say, I'm the horrible boss, and I change my behavior. I understand how that will change everything.
Yeah.
But I don't understand how random things.
Yeah.
But it will only change for you. It won't change for the
Well, but if the
itself.
of all the people in the group are, if you walk in every day and you're finally not an ogre.
Yeah, we see how it
everybody in that room
reaches
feels-
outward as well. Yeah.
Not if they have their own baggage, from my experience.
what you're saying from your experience is that, like, how many times do you walk into a situation where someone's hurting you? If they're not going to change, the only thing to do is either
If
you
you
change or
change,
you leave.
yes.
But we can get
Yeah.
help from others when they change, right? Just imagine you're in a relationship with one person and they're really working on themselves spiritually. Won't that have an effect on you and help? You know, it can help
Oh, yeah.
the environment, you know, so it helps us. It gives us a push, but we still have to make our own changes within ourselves. If you're saying, yeah.
And that's why Radha Goswami says to be with like-minded people.
Yeah.
Because they can
Yeah.
inspire.
Yeah, then all of a sudden you're in an environment where everybody's working on themselves. Imagine that.
Right.
Yeah.
And then how it supports each other. And that's why there's the value of Sangha, association,
Yes.
where people are thinking that way. We get so much help if we have other people around us thinking the same way, right?
Yeah,
If it's only me and then others aren't, it's tough.
much harder.
Yeah.
And it's the group consciousness, actually, when the Tiger actually just wanted to speak, it's that the energy with the group all focused on the same
Yeah.
thing, it's
Yeah.
like exponential.
Yeah.
It's huge, which is why when you have your
Exactly.
chanting,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so how to make that change, right? We have this consciousness. In Sanskrit, it's called svabhava, which is the sum total of all my thoughts, feelings, actions. It's a substance within me, almost like a subtle magnetic substance. And it draws certain things into my life and also repels other things. So how to get at changing that? Right? What is the way to starting to make a change of that thing that's inside of me that attracts things and also repels other things? If I was to say that the functions of the mind, they say, are three: thinking, feeling, and willing. What do you think is the way, the entrance point of starting to make a change? Thinking, feeling, willing.
Thinking, feeling, and what?
Willing.
Willing.
Thinking, feeling, action.
Kind of in that order.
Yeah. Maybe, you know, in some ways it is, but if I tell you right now to change what you're feeling, how's that going to work?
It makes me think.
Huh?
It causes me to consider and try to see
Yeah.
what's happening and can I catch it?
Yeah. But suppose you're just overwhelmed, you have an overwhelmed feeling, and I say, stop that or change that. Is that an easy thing to do?
May not always catch.
That's what I mean. It's not easy to go directly at the feelings. It's not easy. So therefore, you don't actually start with the feelings. If I say, think of something differently, think of these new thoughts or these new ideas, that is possible,
Yes.
right?
I'm very influenced by that. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean I can keep it up.
Right.
If somebody said to me, why don't you,
Give me tools.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of an example. Trying to think of a good, but if somebody, I'm amazed at how some people suggest things to me and a way I could look at something.
Yeah.
And I'm shocked
Yeah. Look at
Try
this.
to think of one.
Look at this. Look at this powerful verse from. You see, I have on B there. Thought the builder. Underneath is this verse from the Upanishads, which is from the Vedic tradition. It says, "The world is just one's thoughts. With effort, then, it should be cleansed by each one of us. As is one's thoughts, so one becomes. This is the eternal secret."
Yeah.
It's powerful because it shows that by a cultivation of certain thoughts, that will change who you are, and then when who you are changes, also what happens changes, the events in life. So it actually, thoughts is considered to be the way, new thoughts, new ideas, and let them enter in deeply, and that will change your life gradually. Because you can't go to the feelings. The feelings are already fixed in one sense, right? Something happens and we're going to just feel a certain way, and if I tell you to stop that, you can't. If I tell you to love your enemies, that's something there you find in the Bible, love your enemies. But can you really just do it from a decision? No, right? So how to get at that change is through thoughts, thinking about what that means and how to actually do it. And divine thoughts, especially spiritual thoughts, because the spirit is the core of who we are. So these spiritual thoughts start to give us a momentum where the change can also take place within our actions and in our feelings. So thinking, feeling, willing, but thinking seems to be the key of where to go, how to start this process of change. Right. So therefore, I threw a Bible verse in there too, because it's very nice. It says, "My dear brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think on these things." Think on those things. Let your mind start to think on higher things. You see?
Instead of every day,
Yeah.
your checklist.
Yeah. And we have thoughts. Yeah.
Right.
We have thoughts and beliefs and ideas that are so deep-rooted, and that's determining our life experience. You know, like as a child may have a thought that life is unfair. You keep repeating that thought again and again, not with your mouth, but just internally. You keep replaying that idea that life is unfair, life is unfair. What do you start to create? An unfair life. Things will start to happen. You get entangled in that, right?
But if you are watching TV every day with, say, Trump and the separated kids and all that, which is so horrible, would you suggest not watching?
Well, there's a way.
It's hard to think of.
Some people would say, in order to get at the spiritual ideas and spiritual thoughts, better to avoid that for some time until you have the power to hear that and not be totally influenced and affected.
But how do you hear any upsetting, sad thing without being influenced by it?
Well, you could be influenced.
Hear it until they get exception, then shut it down.
Yeah.
I think it's Mother Teresa's quote. Ask me to march and to your rally, I will. Ask me to march in peace rally, I will. Because what's your focus? My focus is, if I'm not doing anything directly, I'm going to focus on something I can do, because that's better for me and it's better for the world.
Right.
If something really bothers you and you can do something about it, then you're going to feel empowered and then you're going to
Right.
focus on the positive. But these people that sit around all day complaining about it or thinking of it,
Right.
it takes them down.
Well, but I am doing something.
That's
You know,
great.
I hear about candidates and I contribute to them and all that, but at the same time, you're watching it and you know
I
that he
wouldn't
didn't
overwatch
return these children yet, you know.
Yeah, I mean, part of the path of yoga is to be selective
Yeah.
of what we take in. Because, you know, we eat with our mouths, but it actually says all of the senses eat.
Yeah.
The eyes eat, the ears eat,
Yeah.
and you are what you eat, right? So we're creating a certain consciousness
Yeah.
by taking in certain impressions.
I never watch.
I'm trying
So,
not to.
so to be selective is good advice, to be selective. See what's going to actually help with taking those influences.
Send a prayer.
What's that?
Not a
Send a
prayer.
prayer.
Yeah.
Sending prayer.
You have to. I mean, you can't not know what's going on. Knowing
Yeah.
is part of it.
Yeah.
And then if you need to send a prayer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to support the candidates that are
That's what I do.
all, you know,
Oh, it's-
that'll change it, change the balance of power.
Yeah. You see, but that balance of power will always go back and forth if there's no spiritual, because it always does. That's just the history. I'm not saying anything surprising or strange. If you look at the history, it's always going to keep flipping. As soon as you,
This is particularly different.
the thing, as soon as you fight strongly for a cause, you invoke the opposite. Because other people who have the opposite idea, they start to rise up. Oh, you're saying this? Think about liberals and conservatives. As soon as the liberal becomes strong, it brings up the conservative mood, right?
Yeah.
Right? And then there's no solution there. It just alternates. That's the way it works. So until we go deeper and change the level of consciousness, and these things will always alternate. And so, okay, you can still be involved and do what's necessary at certain times, but to understand this principle is very profound. To understand that's the real solution. And that's why we bring the spirit to the discussion. It's the cycle. The cycle just keeps going round and round. And what's the way out? It's not through, right? So this other verse, 8.5, again from the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says, "Whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt." So Krishna is saying by thinking of him at the time of death, one awakens their own godly nature, their own divine nature. If we think this is all we are, this ego and this reasoning that we have and this logic, then we're actually justified to fear death.
Yeah.
Because if this is all I am, this is what dies. This does die. If I think that just my limited mind and this body, if that's all I am, if I have nothing higher within me, well then we have to connect to the spirit is the only way to overcome the fear of death, because that's what's eternal. But this personality that I have, this body that I have, this does go through death, this does die. So if this is all I am, and I'm not centered in the spirit, then it makes sense to fear death, because this does die.
How come there's so many people that are not religious and they don't care about dying?
Well, then to not care about it doesn't mean you've really overcome the reality of it. So it's a way of just dismissing it, putting it out of the mind, denial.
Right.
It's not like this powerful realization of overcoming and really facing it.
And are they really
Right.
being
Yeah, exactly. I met someone in the hospital who, she told me when she was very young, she was in a motorcycle accident. And so they hit a car in a motorcycle, and she was in slow motion kind of going over this car. And she had the realization, I'm probably going to die from this. But she said there was no fear at all. And she was totally at peace. So anyway, she survived it. And then many years passed. And then I met her when she was 65, and she was in the hospital. And when I asked her, why do you want to do this work of helping people when they're dying? She said, because I'm so much afraid of death that I want to learn how to face it. But she told the story that when she was young, there was no fear. But she realized later she wasn't even in touch with the fear. It took so much later to realize actually it is there. It's buried very deep, and now it's coming out, and now I want to face it in a more real way. So there's a certain way when we're young we can kind of be reckless and not care and feel like we're safe and we're okay, but have we really faced that deep, that buried fear in our heart? And so much later she's really, actually I am afraid and I want to learn how to really be there and be comfortable.
Have you ever been at the bedside of someone who's truly not afraid of dying?
It's pretty rare, but I would say yes, that there is a man who's very strong, a very strong Christian path. And what he wanted to do when he was getting closer to death, he said he wanted to chant hymns. And he asked if I could help him chant these Christian hymns from and they were beautiful. And so he wanted to do it. He was singing, It was close to death. He had maybe just a couple days. They were estimating a few days or couple weeks at most. And I saw him singing with his family, and they kind of came around the bedside. And he was singing with tears, but those were tears of really joy and connection to God. And I saw a real peace. And he said that, I lived my life. It was a real acceptance that I've done my best. And he said, I know whatever good I've done, that will stay with me. So that kind of confidence was there. And I felt like I saw him pass away, and his family created the right environment where they were just loving him and supporting him. And I saw him just let go and pass with a certain peace that was special.
Another thing as directives is to tell your family what you expect and you want to support you. And people don't think about that. Because a lot of times they're in fear, they're trying to keep you alive when it's your time to go.
It was beautiful. The sadness was very natural. There can be sadness, obviously. It's so natural that we're gonna miss. But at the same time, the family I saw, they were very sure of what he wanted because he communicated it, and they just gave him all that support, and such a beautiful environment was created. And I saw him just let go. He was given permission to let go from his family as well.
Yeah, that's a big one.
You know, he let go, they let him go, and there was love in the room.
But do you think people are afraid because they're afraid of what's out there and they don't know what's going to happen
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
they die? That's the main
No, I
fear.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, sure.
Or it could be that they're just not ready to go yet.
Well, that they're sad and they don't want to leave this earth and their
Yeah.
family. I can see
And
that.
they would, you know,
But it's some unknown, like my friend's mother's dying, she's like, I don't know,
What's
What's
gonna
out there.
happen? You could be
Yeah.
going to hell or something.
but she's like a very controlled person in her life. Someone once said to me, Jean Denny, who's been in a workshop here, who died and we live, that it's out of her control, and that is a very scary thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why there's always this talk of surrender.
Yeah.
Surrender means to surrender a kind of trust, a trusting willingness to go through the process, put the trust. You trust in God, trust in my own higher nature, to really trust that. So somehow this ego that's very limited has to surrender to the higher part of ourselves, and also has to surrender to God. You know, so that, how does that transition? You know, that's the real thing.
how do you help someone who you never, my father,
Yeah.
to have that conversation?
Yeah. Well, the real thing is we can try to figure out how to help another person. When we start to do it, then we get the intuition of actually how to help others. Because I can just go buy a book and say, okay, this is the best way to treat somebody when they're dying, or this is, you know, it all goes out the window when you're there and someone's suffering and you have no idea what to do or say. But the idea of what we want to offer here is that by ourselves taking that spiritual path and surrendering to those moments when difficulty comes in my life, when we start to surrender to it, we start to get a kind of wisdom of what that really means, and then we can share that with others in ways that we can't even imagine, you know? That's the real answer. Otherwise, there can be books that tell us techniques and things, but I learn all that stuff. It goes out the window when I'm there with someone who's dying. I'm trying to remember some, technique of how to. It's really just becomes a heart to heart. And the more we can practice when difficulty comes in our life, what it means to surrender, to trust what's happening and to let it happen, to endure it with the right attitude of service and love, that prepares us for death.
Well, what do you say to them? I mean,
That's the thing. I can tell you some answer of what to say, but it's not going to work when you're there, because we have to learn how to handle difficulty and suffering when it comes into our own lives.
We have to be present and listen, and we talked about this. It's not about doing as much as being with them. And when you're really present, it just happens, right? It
Yeah.
unfolds where you know what to do because you're not trying to direct it.
Yeah.
That's what it's really about.
And
We learn that in the end of life training.
Yeah.
Like you said, everything goes out the window. It's you are there for that person. You're just there and you're loving them, and somehow you're guiding.
Yeah. To trust that there is guidance within us. There's God within us that will give us, but we have to practice that now. That's the practice for us.
I remember being in somebody's hospital room who was dying, who I knew well, and I didn't feel in most things hinged. In fact, I think I did the wrong thing, because I was telling her she was dying. I didn't really realize it. I was saying, come on, you can hold on. I mean, when I think of what I said to her, I'm pretty horrified.
So do you think, looking back, that you were more in the role of the doer and feeling you had to do something as opposed to just saying, okay,
Yeah, I don't think I had a clue. And I mean, and she did die. She was young. She had breast cancer, you know. And when I look back on it now, I say, you know, I was in the room saying, come on, Lori, I know you can hang on. And I mean, it was the worst thing
you
to
were
say.
doing what you thought was
Well,
best?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You can't just turn on this being that's very compassionate and has wisdom. We have to practice it throughout our lives. So the real question for us becomes, okay, whatever difficulty I'm going through right now in my life, whatever it may be, maybe it's somebody just insulted me, maybe I just lost something, maybe I just became disappointed. How am I meeting that? right now?
I have all of those.
Sorry?
You have what?
I have all of those, can I?
Yeah, so then how am I meeting it? Am I meeting it by just trying to really face it with a kind of integrity and love and just endure whatever I've created? Whatever I've created, it's coming. Can I endure it with a spirit of surrender? And at the same time,
What's that? The spirit of surrender.
Well, that's-
I mean, like you said, let's say something bad is happening with your child.
yeah.
What do you mean the spirit of
So
surrender?
what's a beautiful way to handle that? Something's happening with your child. What's a consciousness? Give me some words or some ideas that would be a very beautiful way of handling that situation.
I think I would do, I mean, this is not the right answer, but I would do research and figure out how to help.
Well, that's one thing sometimes we do, but with your own consciousness, what's some way, if we just think about it, okay, we just think, what's a way for me to handle this that will actually be uplifting and good? What are some ideas? Anyone?
In a horrible situation?
Yeah, she said this example.
Yeah.
Something's happening to...
Yeah, think of something your child wants to do.
Okay. Well, it's not just about doing something, but what's the way you can actually handle it with your consciousness that can be uplifting?
Chanting,
Okay.
I don't know, doing yoga, listening to a book, watching TV and being distracted. Well, I know that's not the right thing, but you're still, if you want to be distracted and you're very upset,
Yeah.
what you have to change, you could be ruminating about your child all day.
Right. Anyone else have thoughts? Yeah.
I think, which I didn't do, that is going in and finding the place in yourself that is in discomfort about this, trying to meet that place with some compassion within yourself first,
Okay.
so you could offer it to the situation.
Okay. I think that's pretty powerful. Right? It's something really just going in and seeking and praying, how can I serve? How can I serve right now? Maybe just like that question becomes so deep within us, we start to get some
That's
intelligence.
the perfect question.
Yeah.
But serve your child or
Yeah.
yourself?
Well, if you serve your child, you're serving yourself. If you serve yourself in the right way, you can serve your child, right? So they're one and the same ultimately.
Somehow that when you say, how can I serve, I did it once with my dad, kind of miracles start to happen. It's hard to do that when you're triggered, but to say, how can I serve,
Yeah.
kind of stops the train.
Yeah. I walk into a room or the situation is very complex and a person is sick and their family is there, and I have no idea what to say or do to actually help, but I just carry in with me this consciousness that, God, please allow me to be of some service. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm just going to be open to just trying to give some kind of help or service here. And that consciousness itself things start to manifest, but it has to be practiced. It's almost like you're really taking a risk. It requires some surrender and some courage to let go of my plans and just open myself to a power that's above my own. And that's the practice. And that's the more we try that.
Is it selfish to feel such emotion?
Selfish? To feel what emotion?
Well, I mean, when, let's say you are dealing with a loved one who is ill or sick and, they have so much going on.
Yeah.
And, is your sorrow in the right place? Am I just, am I sad for him? Am I sad for him in this road that he's about to travel on? Am I sad for myself because I'm being cheated or, from the laws? So,
Right, so even the fact that you're asking that question shows that we have to feel out the answer there. Why am I sad? Am I sad because I'm losing something? So the more you tune into that question, the more you start to get self-knowledge, and then that will start to illuminate because sadness is okay, and this compassion and sadness, but we start to have to feel within ourselves, what is that pure kind of sadness, or what actually allows me to be, because of course sadness is going to be natural, but it has to be a certain quality for it to actually be helpful, right? If the sadness is, I don't want to let you go, because then we tune into that. Okay, maybe that's a little bit there, and we have to admit it, right? But then to be able to tune in and see, but there's also a sadness because of what's happening, but also this out of love, of a kind of love. So the only answer to that is in our own feelings. But the fact that you're asking shows that you have a discrimination that knows that could be two different ways of dealing with this, right? That's where it begins, just that question, tuning into that question. Any thoughts on or anything?
What to do with someone that doesn't have consciousness at the time of their death?
Yeah.
You can't find out what they expect or what they want temporarily.
Yeah. Yeah, so then, if someone's not responsive at the time, someone is sick, how to serve such people. In one sense it's the same. It's still the same. If you treat it exactly the same, almost as if everything you do with your consciousness is uplifting to them, because it actually is. And maybe not on the level of the mind, but their minds are maybe not fully conscious, but there's still the spirit within that can still receive. So it's like nothing changes. Just take it that way. Nothing changes. I still want to give love. I still want to ask that question, how to serve. I still want to pray for this person. If you just think nothing changes, even though I can't see them responding and reacting, and I don't know if what they're hearing, what they're not hearing, but take it that very deep within them, there's a way to influence on a deep level. Just imagine if you're in this spiritual consciousness. Conversation with others, you're impacting them in a way that we can't see or know, but it's happening on a deeper level, so we can trust that. So that's why even nurses, and they'll tell you, speak to them, even if you think they can't hear. Speak to them, express your love to them, When no one's around, if you have to, because sometimes it's maybe you feel strange, whatever it is, go there and say, I love you, I care for you, I want to just send nothing but love, and I pray that you're uplifted and you're connected, even though you're, physically you may be experiencing this challenge. So, thank you for coming.
I have to go back to Connecticut.
Thank you for coming.
But at least I got to sit here for a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate your coming. Best wishes. So if you flip over, we've already talked about a lot of this. The way Krishna describes this material world in a very strong way. He says it's a place of suffering, and he gives two adjectives to describe the material world. It's temporary, and there's suffering. But somehow the fact that the world is that way, those two things are the keys to truly living, is to face those two things. The inevitability of those two things, that there's temporariness and there's also suffering. Now, how do I face those things? That determines everything. That determines
Temporariness of what?
everything.
Of life?
Right? Everything is changing. Our relationships, matter just goes through these phases of things are born, things remain for some time, and then things are gone. And then again, things come back. Day and night, day and night. These are also like life and death, little small micro examples of that same principle of things coming and going, coming and going. How to live with that, how to be okay with that, how to accept that and to go on living with courage and love. Right? And then suffering, again, how do I deal with that? So if somehow these two things are the most difficult things in life, so if we can face them with love and with integrity, then we're actually transcending them. We transcend them. That's the power of it. So that big question that everybody's asking, why is there suffering and why are we in this place where things are just, we want love, we want things to last, we want permanent, but at the same time things are going away. Though that is the very essence of the key of how to overcome, how to transcend these things. So this is the whole point, the whole reason for being in this material world. Look at these quotes here. I have this Kierkegaard quote that I like a lot. One who has learned how to suffer has learned the ultimate.
So that's very curious.
Interesting, right? How to suffer.
Just like how to feel,
Yeah,
because you can feel the
right.
out love and
Exactly. Especially it's challenging when suffering comes. So that's why he's emphasizing that, because that's when we really can go in the opposite direction. Again, we can blame There can be anger as a response, there can be resentment, and we may have to go through whatever is there. We may have to feel what we're feeling. But to know if I get this right, if I learn how to suffer in the right way, in a way that's actually uplifting and purifying for myself, then I'm actually transcending suffering. It's actually possible. And then this other quote by Carl Jung, the psychiatrist. All neuroses, now he speaks on a psychological level, all neuroses is due to avoiding legitimate suffering. Powerful quote, huh? All the problems of our mind, there's something in us that wants to avoid suffering, and that's causing all of our problems. So somehow it has to be faced and dealt with in the right way, and that's
So suffering is actually going to help us grow.
Of course, right? Don't we experience that sometimes? If we really, it takes time, that lesson, but aren't there some examples you can think of when a time of difficulty came or a challenge came in your life or a level of suffering came, and somehow you learned through time or through experience that, wow, if that didn't happen, then I wouldn't be this today, or this wouldn't have changed, or this wouldn't have taught me some lesson, right? Imagine every time suffering comes, we know, okay, here it is, here's the test, here's the challenge. If I face this right, I can grow so much, you know? It always comes through suffering, even though we don't want that, but it's
So sailing through life is actually not really...
Imagine if it was just totally smooth, then where would those deeper questions be? Why? Where would those deeper questions?
I feel like I always have questions.
Well, that's a good place to be. If we really open to that, like we were saying in the beginning, that burning question, if we have burning questions, that opens our heart in a certain way for the answer. There are answers to everything, and they're within us. But unless we really want to know, and why do you really want to know? You want to know when you're suffering, right?
Get through one curve and then try it.
Yeah. So imagine if life, there were no challenges, we might think that's nice. We might think, oh, that'd be pretty peaceful, but there'd be no urge for anything higher. There'd be no question of why is there death, and how do I solve that problem? How do I solve the problem of it would just be going on and on and on, and we think that would be nice because we're imagining that it's not sustained actually on this level. So all of the struggles make us question. There's a verse in another book called the Vedanta Sutra. The verse starts with this, it's very interesting. It starts with atato brahma jigyasya, which means the book starts by saying, therefore. Very interesting that the book starts with therefore. Therefore, now it's time to inquire into the absolute truth. So the way the commentators explain that is that when you become finally a human being, and now you have a mind that can inquire, and you've gone through enough suffering in life where now you want to know what is the absolute truth. So now this book is for you. Now you're ready for this book. It starts with the word therefore, a book that starts with, because it means you've gone through so much else, so many other things, so much suffering, but now you're open to the answer, the solution, the ultimate solution, and now you're ready for this book, and now the verses begin. Yeah, you have to be ready. You have to be ready. In a certain moment, a psychological moment, not a moment in time. Time doesn't really produce that moment, but you've gone through certain experiences and now psychologically, spiritually you're ready to inquire into the absolute truth. So very fascinating that a book starts with the word therefore. It means everything else has happened, now you're ready for this teaching. So, but that readiness takes a long time. Because it means you're done with blaming, you're done with trying to make some external change. You have a realization that the solutions are not there. The solution is within myself if I open myself to that truth. So, yeah, meditate on these, great. You see, every philosopher and all the different spiritual traditions, I put other quotes from other places just to show that this is a universal truth. It's not just from this little book in India, but it's found, very deep people find this out everywhere, that the key to life is in how to face suffering, how to die before dying, which means connecting to my spirit, connecting to the Supreme Spirit, God. practicing that is preparing me for that moment, and
You allow the suffering
yeah,
instead of fighting it,
yeah,
and to do the
yeah,
how do you allow it when your natural response is to,
yeah.
you know,
Resist it.
resist it?
Resist it,
Yes.
fight
How
it,
do you-
avoid it. Start to feel what that means to allow it, right? What does that feel like? It, first of all, it means to endure it and not put it aside, not fight it, not avoid it. Sometimes you just feel it, go through it, right? Trusting. Here's a nice word for her surrender, trusting willingness. Think about that, a trusting willingness. So you say how to do it. Think about that consciousness. First of all, I'm trusting that I can go through this and face it and be okay. It's a big word, right? I'm willing to go through it and to trust. That consciousness is really beautiful. Trusting in that there's a spirit within me that can handle anything. Trusting that God is there, that ultimately there's good. There's good in the background of everything.
How can you trust something for your own self?
Yeah, this is it. This is what we're struggling with, right? So it's not going to be some answer that suddenly, but try to feel what this means. Try to feel what it means that when suffering comes, to have this attitude of trusting willingness.
So there's some constant realizations that I keep coming across lately. I see that a lot of time clients, and I can feel these things out.
Yeah,
Just like it's all coming at me, shifting all over the place.
yeah,
And in the moment, you really feel isolated.
yeah,
You're suffering. Everything that you're suffering is real and big. And your suffering seems to be yours and yours alone. And you know, the outside world's having a party,
mm,
right? They don't feel any of this. You're the one that's like completely, you know, in the bowl.
Yeah.
And you don't know if you're falling down the rabbit hole all the way or if you're going to find your way up again. And it takes all, I mean, because we are so smart, because we are here in this kind of situation itself creates that support.
yeah,
And you realize how much love you have,
yeah,
so much love. And suffering is going on, and everybody that you look at has their own personal suffering going on.
yeah,
They may be quiet about it or, you know, they're loud.
yeah,
Actually, it's interesting because we've both gone through loved ones that are declining. So it's great that you can share.
yeah, yeah,
And right, goes up,
yeah,
every time I think I have control over the situation, I absolutely do.
yeah. That's the thing. We have a very limited mind, and that's why if we're identified with that, if that's all I am, you know, it's like letting go of that control and trusting that there's something deeper in ourselves, right? And that's scary, that letting go. So then some of these words can help us understand what this consciousness means. It's a kind of letting go and trusting in something higher within you. You know, think about these moments and just ponder for a moment the most beautiful moments of your life and see if it was accompanied by this idea of letting go and surrendering to something that was not so usual within you, somehow a higher thing, right? The most beautiful moments always have that in them. You know, where you somehow, there's this letting go of something and then connecting to something more profound within you, something deeper within you, right? Think about overwhelming experience or some beautiful experience. It's usually not just because we were trying to control it and then something good happened, but something kind of a letting go and a trusting. You know, any thoughts, any ideas, any experiences come to mind?
Oh, not that long ago.
Yeah? Can you share a little bit?
Well, I mean, I've had, you know, I had my mother passing a year ago, my father was bad.
Yeah,
I had a job
Yeah.
where it was not healthy.
Yeah.
I was there a very, very long time.
yeah,
And I realized that everything was changing all around me.
yeah,
Even the way I was handling their drama,
Yeah.
their spiel,
yeah,
every time,
yeah,
it wasn't working for me anymore. I wasn't buying into it anymore.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I felt a strong sense of awakening.
Yeah.
And so I could play the game anymore.
Yeah.
And in a matter of months, I was able to somehow get them to fire me. But when it happened, it was a wonderful moment. I never felt so happy. I got fired.
Yeah.
I
Free.
never felt so happy.
Freedom,
Is that
right?
insane? I mean, it's insane.
No, it's
I
not.
don't have a job yet, and it's not insane. It was wonderful. Do you remember how thrilled I was? I still am.
Yeah. Yeah.
One door closes, another one opens.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that door.
You're waiting for what?
I'm waiting for the door. I realize the door will open.
So that's it. That's the. See, you're in a really good place right now. I know it sounds crazy.
Wait once in a while.
I know, of course.
I'm always that strong.
No, I know. But this place you're in, I promise you, you're in a really good place because you can just open your heart a little bit and ask, okay, what's the next opportunity for me to serve? What's it going to be? And if if it wasn't that anxiety, you wouldn't be open in that way. So just trust. Trust to stay open. It may take a little time. Things are going to happen maybe with time, but it's not going to be, if you really open yourself with the right spirit, there's going to be a response.
And somehow I absolutely feel older and wiser.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, because
Yeah.
it is a really free experience.
Yeah.
Now, my dad, I'm just praying.
Yeah. There's a feeling of fearlessness. It comes and goes, like you said, but still you tasted a little bit of it, right? Joy. So interesting that it comes with this letting go and this surrendering to some trusting something else within you.
And boy, were there storms.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many.
I remember one time I went to a place in India. It was a very holy place. And that's why I wear this ring. It reminds me of that place, the experience I had there. So it's a beautiful place. It's called Radha Kund. And I went there, and I don't know, I was feeling some anxiety in my mind. I was thinking about, okay, I'm leaving India in a week. And I was starting to prepare in my mind, okay, make sure I packed it. And my mind was a little distracted, even though I was in a very special, powerful place. And so I sat down there by this little body of water. And I just started to try to connect that, just let that go and just experience where I am right now and open myself to the power of this place. And I struggled with it for a little bit. Again, there's a tension. And then I started to feel my mind started to relax a little. And I started to let go of all these anxieties. And I just felt this incredible opening to what was just happening and what I was experiencing. And it was like I felt totally cleansed in my mind. It washed away. And I felt like, oh my God, this is what it feels like to be a spiritual being. There was no mental agitation and anxiety. It went away. Fear went away. And I couldn't believe what was happening. I was a little embarrassed. People were around me, and I felt like crying, but I was trying to hold it back. This is going to get really weird. And they started chanting this song to God, and I was reading the words, and they were just a beautiful glory. I felt like I could fully just glorify God without being out of my own world and my own anxieties and my own absorption, and I can just love. And that experience just gave me a taste that this is all true. There's a part, I tasted it for just a few moments, but there's a spiritual being where there's no fear, there's no anxiety, there's no worry. And that experience just changed my life, and I realized that everything I'm learning about is true. I got a little taste of it. It goes beyond the theoretical, and you start to a little bit taste it. And then I realized, okay, I need more of this.
So can you pull from that sense of self more readily? I mean, we're human.
Yeah.
So we get pulled, we get,
Yeah.
we get tugs of all these different things.
Back and forth.
Does it come easier?
It comes
in time? Are we all able to hit that wall maybe just for a shorter amount of time?
See, it will come more and more. Of course. Think about it. If I had the experience once, okay, now I know it exists. So, okay, here I find myself in another difficult situation. Let me try to put myself back there. Okay, maybe it doesn't work that time. Let me try another time. Then here it comes again a little bit, a little taste. And then here's where I am. Now I have the association of people who I'm seeing have more and more of it. And what do they say? They say it's practice. It's going back into that space of trusting willingness. And then finally you come in contact, if you experience someone who's really living in that state, again, that builds your confidence. Now someone here is someone who's done it again and again and again. Yeah. No, Barbara's gone through so much in her life, right? It's there.
No, but I get totally triggered. As much in that state as I could be today, something effortlessly really triggered me. So as easy as it is to be in that state, is as easy as it is to get pulled out.
Yeah.
And then that only shows you more of what you need to do.
Yeah.
Because we all have triggers. We all have areas of weakness.
Yeah.
And
But finding your way out of the rabbit hole is, you don't stop your life. You don't stop. You came out. You came out of the house. That in itself is a huge deal.
that is, it's not giving, it's, if you look at it as like it's like Abraham Hicks, it's energy, right? So where are you gonna focus it? Because if you focus it on the negative of what's going on, that will amplify. And even if you get thrown off, you still wanna go with a higher vibration, with a higher consciousness. Otherwise, if you see there's some, I think Eckhart Tolle said this, when you argue with reality, that's when you're going down. If someone's dying and you're saying they're not dying, no, it's not gonna happen, that's not good for them or you. If your life is this way and you're like, no, it's not supposed to be, it's supposed to be, then focus on what you're grateful for and move that way. But the second you start to argue with your current reality, things will, it's very hard. You can't argue with
And
reality.
that's what
Yeah.
letting go.
It's surrendering to what is.
Right, instead of fighting it.
It's surrendering, but it's also focusing on gratitude.
And
Focus
service.
and
And service. That's why the Gita, this chapter ends. I have these last couple of verses here. It ends in a very interesting way, this chapter, because it talks about what really reveals God within ourselves and the reality of God. It's not by our intelligence or, again, this limited logic that we have. You see times these debates. I used to be into these debates of like the existence of God. So you hear somebody make some points and you're like, oh, that's very convincing. And then you hear the opposite side, like that's also convincing. Because
That's why politics I can't do.
exactly, same thing. Someone argues one side.
What are you wearing?
Yeah.
I might like that.
Because the proof of God's existence is not going to be through some logic or argument. But how does it really come? It comes when we develop a service attitude. This verse says, if you look, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. Devotion means devotional service. So God is attained and revealed through an attitude that I have of wanting to serve. It's beautiful, isn't it? Although he is present in his abode, he is all-pervading and everything is situated within him. That realization only comes when we develop. So when suffering comes, imagine being in the mindset, okay, here's an opportunity for me. How can I serve under these circumstances? Imagine that mindset. That's even higher than just, can I deal with it? Can I tolerate it? Can I endure?
But to be so logical in the moment, it's like, okay, how do we?
But it's not logic. It's not logic. It's
not.
connecting.
A step further is, it's not why is this happening to me. Okay, it is, what's the growth opportunity here?
Yeah.
Like, wow, how can I turn this into something positive?
Yeah.
What's this showing me
Right.
what I still have to grow and learn
Yeah.
or do?
Yeah.
Instead of being a victim.
Exactly.
Because once you're a victim, then you go back. It's
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah. Yeah. Any thoughts or comments or questions?
How to separate debate and winning debates and having someone change your logic or change your thoughts versus changing your being.
Yeah. Yeah. We can help to change another's being on a deep level when we start changing our own being and do all these things that we're talking about now in our own life. Because the words on the level of the mind, some people hear something and just, they can think, oh, that sounds right, or they could say that sounds like nonsense. Because it's all happening on a very limited level of the mind, right? Therefore, when we start to, again, apply these things, then we start to change our being, and now we're operating where we can influence another's being. And then from within, I always give the same answer, and it can be a little frustrating because we want a different kind of answer. We want like, oh, tell me what to do or say that really works, something that works, right?
Because everybody perceives.
Yeah. That's why St. Francis, he has this great thing that he said, now go out and preach to everybody. And if necessary, use words sometimes. Which means, he was saying, go out and preach doesn't mean tell them things, but means preach by your example. By your own connection, by your own love and service. Show that, be that as a person, and that's the real preaching. That's the real affecting others. Again, trusting that that's true. Of course, we can use words too, like I'm using lots of words for this, right? But it's still, we're trying to get at something deeper that's hard to explain through words, but something that we can try to feel the reality of this trusting surrender. Try to feel the reality of God within me, and surrender and trust that. That's what we're trying to use words to get to that feeling. If we live in that consciousness, then we'll actually affect people in a profound way.
Right, because words are a result of thought.
Yeah.
But if you change your thought, then you don't necessarily have to say the word. Just change.
Yeah. Because the right thoughts will change our being. Will start to change our being. And then with a changed being, then we have a different effect. That's why people who are very spiritually advanced, their presence is very powerful, right? Their presence is powerful. And then the words coming from that presence can affect us in a way that, my words can't affect because I'm not in that presence. So my words can have something, they kind of go into the mind and people, but someone who's living from that consciousness, when they speak, those words are a result of their consciousness, their realization. And that's where we really get touched, because it goes right to the soul, right? It has to go from within out. I'm preparing for this, and I'm like, okay, trying to memorize things and share them. It's only going to go so far, but someone who speaks from within, from their own realization, that touches a person's spirit. That's why there's so much emphasis. Huh? That's why there's always so much emphasis of finding those personalities that are really living spiritual life. Getting that, Radhanath Swami, right? There's a presence there that you can't just, he didn't memorize a bunch of good teachings. He's lived for so many years in a certain way that he has a power. And his speech reflects that consciousness. Yeah.
And his humility and
Yeah.
his authenticity is and he embodies it totally.
Yeah, and how did he become so humble? How? Because of his whole teaching is how do you respond to everything that comes to you in your life? He's practiced that for so long and so sincerely. Again, like we're talking about, the response to suffering. He suffered so much, but he always responded with this, okay, how to serve, and I'm suffering, now how can this be an opportunity for me to serve others? And he's done it so many times that he has a being that's very impactful. Not just
You mean suffered till he got to where he was? Or
yeah, suffering, his life, there's so much suffering in his life, but he's kept meeting it in the right consciousness, taking shelter of God in the suffering, trusting that this is for a higher purpose, trusting that there's goodness behind all of this. Let me find that. Let me find the reason. Let me find the way. Yeah.
So, Ganeshyam, back to chapter 8.
Yeah.
of the Gita. Can you give us the pearls of this chapter for ourselves and our loved ones about the consciousness at the time of transition?
The pearls of whose consciousness? The person dying?
No, the pearls that you have gained as well as this chapter in the Gita about transitioning and how we could be of service as well as to the person who's transitioning. I mean, I know the state of consciousness is something that's really emphasized in the Gita, what you're focusing on.
Yeah, so that's, if we have an opportunity, or someone who's transitioning, if we have the opportunity to share a spiritual sound, like the Krishna mantra that we chant, that's considered the most auspicious departure, is to be surrounded, to be absorbed in that sound vibration, right? So if we have an opportunity to share that and give that, that's an incredible blessing. Also, but again, throughout our life, that we're using it. We're using that vibration to purify ourselves. And again, then therefore, when it comes from my mouth, then it actually has that power. It has that power. So our own spiritual practice. Therefore, all these things are the pearls. These are the pearls. How do I face suffering? What sangha, what association am I putting myself in?
Right. How do we all face the suffering?
Yeah.
It speaks volumes.
That's it. Yeah.
When Abraham Hicks talks about souls passing, he doesn't say they've died. She'd rather say they croaked, because really she doesn't feel they've died as in a bad sense.
Yeah.
Because they're always so just spirits that their souls are still alive.
Well, Ganeshyam said before he came that if all we are this body and what we identify with it,
Yeah.
and death is going to be horrifying and
Yeah.
overwhelming, as opposed to Ram Dass, what does he say? It's like taking off an old suit.
Well, I think old tight shoes. Yeah.
So that
He says dying is, he said there's a quote, dying is like removing a tight shoe. It's a kind of freedom, actually. This body is so restricting, and it's like the soul, finally dropping the body, which is causes, at the old age, there's all these aches and pains, and it's like getting free from that. But of course, so in some ways it's like releasing this kind of painful situation, releasing from it.
It's like the caterpillar who turns into the butterfly.
Yeah,
It's not an easy transition necessarily, but it's freedom.
yeah. Some thought?
And I think that's something to totally learn. Learning something like that takes away the fear. It's not just for yourself, but for the person as well.
Yeah. Any comment or question?
Yeah, what about being free from the body or from just like letting spirit be its own self within the body, which is, I think, embodiment. How does that work with the time of transition when we're saying, or people say, it's like leaving a shoe that is too tight fitting? I think that is suffering, that if it feels tight fitting, then it's not, spirit's not really free or embodied. I don't know. I think a tight feeling
Is what?
is suffering as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like just the bodies, we know all the pains and the, disease can come, and all these things are kind of like suffering within the body. If we're connected to our spirit, then there is a way in which these sufferings lessen, because we understand that it's not me. But there may be still some feeling. It's not like pain all of a sudden is just gone completely. But there's an understanding of my spiritual nature, and one can understand that this is just a temporary body. It goes through different pains, come and go. And so there is a way of transcending some of that pain, and maybe for very elevated beings, they can transcend all of it, because there is even like people who are not very spiritual, but somehow had this incredible willpower, mind power, were able to transcend physical pain because of a certain will. Like in India, they have these yogis they put themselves in very austere environment, like they're sitting they put fire all around them, and they're sitting in the middle, not in the fire, but it's around them, and they're sitting in meditation for hours and hours, the heat, and somehow they're just out of the body experience. They're just experiencing they're able to. So that's possible from willpower. But if you truly connect to the spirit, then all these things lessen more and more. So when you're dying, even if you have no spiritual connection, in some ways you're shedding the body. So there's going to be some freedom, but the problem is that do we have a consciousness that's going to just put me in another body? So then I'm free and there's some relief momentarily, but because of the way I've lived, I enter another physical body, and now here goes the body again and all the sufferings of the body.
So what to do with that freedom and the decision making when you are free?
Yeah.
Practice.
So that you don't have another body. Yeah, and that's everything we're discussing. This consciousness of trusting willingness, the right association, the spiritual practice, the chanting. This is the answer to all of it, because it goes directly to the spirit.
We talk about, like, the mind will take you on a race. But it's not so much about being spiritual or human body, it's how do we not become more spiritual? How do we embody our souls in this body peacefully? And how do we just stay present to the truth in the moment as opposed to the story? Because the mind will take us on a roller coaster ride. So it's coming back to the heart, into your essence, which is divine, and being present and not judging yourself, and meeting yourself wherever you are with compassion and love. Because you are divinity. We all have that in us, right? To a certain amount. And
Yeah.
then I think the service is so beautiful.
Well, look,
Service is so
yeah, well, this is what's amazing. Look at the end, these last two verses here. So it says, according to Vedic opinion, there are two ways of passing from this world. Only two. One in light and one in darkness. So what does that mean? It means one who passes in light, they get out of the cycle of birth and death, right? So he does not come back. That's what that means. But when one passes in darkness, he returns. So, but the very interesting thing is, there's two things that can happen at death. Either you finally get liberated and you're out of the cycle, or you keep coming back again and again and again with all the complications and the anxieties and the bodies, physical bodies, right? But listen to the last verses, how the chapter ends. Although the devotees know these two paths, O Arjuna, they are never bewildered. Therefore, be always fixed in devotion. What this means is, my devotee doesn't care either way, whether they come back or they get free. They're just fixed in devotional service. They're fixed in loving service to me, Krishna is saying. So in one sense, a devotee doesn't care if I get liberated or not, if I get free from the cycle or not. You can keep me in the cycle or you can liberate me, but my mood is I just want to serve others and serve God. Just think about how beautiful that consciousness is, right? Service is higher than getting liberated. So maybe there's beautiful verses by devotees of God that say whether I'm in heaven or I'm in hell or I get out or I'm still in this cycle, it doesn't matter. I just want to serve. I want to serve. You get so fixed, you get so absorbed in loving service that you want nothing else. Only thing you want is to serve out of love. Right? This is the idea, this is the deepest understanding of every spiritual tradition. Right? Even Buddhism. Well, Buddhism, what is the Bodhisattva or the Dalai Lama? The understanding is they're a person who they're refusing liberation so that they can keep coming back here to help others. So it's even higher than liberation. And in Krishna, the Krishna tradition, the Bhakti tradition, is that we don't care where we are. We don't care what happens at death. I just want to serve God with love, and I want to serve others with love. You get so fixed on that idea and that consciousness that you're actually in the consciousness of liberation, even it doesn't matter where you are. You're in the consciousness of freedom. In fact, we want to be free. We want to face suffering and death so that we can be free to serve. Not just so that I'm free. It's not selfish that, oh, I'm doing all this so one day I can be free. No, I want to be free so that my service becomes unceasing. So beautiful, that consciousness. All the songs of the devotees of Krishna, they're all about this, that the highest thing is loving service. I don't even care about freedom from suffering. Even if I have to suffer, but in that suffering, if I can be of service to others, this is the highest consciousness possible.
And in all respects,
Yeah. You're getting an opportunity to serve.
I'm getting an opportunity.
What a beautiful, I never even thought of that. That someone's suffering, well, this is a gift because they're giving me the opportunity to serve, right? If you always see, did you hear that?
Yeah.
It's amazing. So if you always in that consciousness of everyone's giving me an opportunity to serve. Yeah. But see, to really serve in that way and to really live in that consciousness, we have to contact God. Because again, it's not by just my power, I'm making a decision. We have to contact divine grace to be able to live in that way. And therefore, when we chant, this idea of chanting God's name, it's putting me in contact with that grace, with that love, so that I can be empowered to serve under all circumstances.
You said something before, I just want to share this with you. The most powerful thing, and it came to me, was I wasn't close with my dad, wasn't conscious, didn't know what to do. And I had to go see him, and I think I told you this, and I said, how can I serve him? I put it out there, how can I serve him? Next thing you know, my stepmother took us to a movie, and we were alone in the movie theater. It was late with pie, but I'm still saying, how can I serve him? I wasn't even close with him, I didn't even want to really be with him. And I look up, and Pi says on the boat, all I want to do is just tell my parents, thank them for what they did do. And I thought, whoa. I went home, and it wasn't about all the things he didn't do and all the things that were wrong. I turned to him and I said, can I thank you for what you've done for me? And he was like, in and out of it, he was like shocked. He said, I don't deserve it, but that changed
Yeah.
the next couple of years of his life. He was 94, but instead of my worrying about myself and thinking about all the things he did wrong, it was all of a sudden about how can I serve him, and I got served the biggest gift.
Of course, right?
And that's how it
Yeah.
works. Like, we don't, like you said, we
Yeah.
can read books, we can
Yeah.
study. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If we just say, just give me the grace, show me
Yes.
how can I serve,
Yeah.
and then let go of trying to control it.
Yeah.
Because I did. I didn't think
Yeah.
I was going to tell me what to do.
Yeah, yeah.
But he did.
Yeah. Beautiful. That's
It's so
exactly it.
cool.
That's it. To keep returning to that practice throughout our life, in every situation.
How can I serve?
That's it.
That's powerful.
And imagine this consciousness that it doesn't even matter. You stop caring about your own liberation. You stop caring if you're the one who passes in light. You know, this says two people pass, one in light, one in darkness. You stop caring. It doesn't even matter anymore. I'm just so absorbed in love. But you see that the devotees of Krishna, this is their prayer. If you read their songs, it always comes back to this point of, all I want is service. That's it. Unceasing, unmotivated, loving service. Just give me that eternally. I don't care where I am, what's going on, I just want to serve. What's that? Even if it's, yeah.
Everyone around me, I want to be able to serve.
That's it.
Make it good.
Even if it seems beyond us, but to just have this as our cherished ideal and keep thinking about it, keep meditating on it, keep hoping for it, keep trying for it, we're starting to grow into it. It's happening. That's the momentum it has to be a struggle at first because we don't really want it. We're not really at that point where that's all I want. No, I have certain things I want for myself. So we have a little bit of a process. But if you keep it as a cherished ideal, keep talking about it, keep thinking about it, keep feeling it, trying to connect to it, keep praying, keep chanting. You know, Prabhupada said when you chant the Maha Mantra, this mantra, it's a prayer to God. He said, and he gave an explanation of what the prayer is. The prayer is, Krishna, please engage me in your service. That's what it means, the Maha Mantra.
You're supposed to think of, when you say that prayer,
Yeah.
are you supposed to think of a situation that might need some assistance?
Maybe that's something that's going on in your life right now, but in general, that's just the attitude I want. Please engage me in your service. Right? It could be, okay, how right now in my life, where's the opportunity? But also just let that be the whole spirit of my existence. Please engage me in your service. He said that's what you're saying when you're chanting Hare Krishna mantra. So that is the prayer within the Maha Mantra of chanting Krishna's name. Yeah.
So praying and saying out loud prayer
Yeah.
is powerful.
Yeah.
And there are many prayers.
Yeah.
And many chants.
Yes, exactly. There are different kinds of prayers. The prayer that may just be a conversation with God, with what we're going through right now in our life. You can just talk with God. Then there's the second prayer, is which when you find the prayer of very elevated souls and you repeat that, you try to connect to their spirit because they're speaking from a high level. That can be helpful. And then there's the prayer, which is, in Christians call this the contemplative prayer, the prayer of the heart. The Sufis talk about this, the repetition of the name of Allah. And there's this repetition of the name of God, which is the highest kind of prayer, because it's just giving that glory and that love, connecting to that grace of God, where you're just repeating a mantra. Every tradition had. The Buddhists have this, the Sufis have this, the Hindus have this, the Christians have this. Where you're just repeating the name of God and entering into this rhythm of accepting that grace within your heart so that you can serve and love. That's the highest prayer. It's even higher than the words prayers where we have conversations. And we might need to do that. We can do all three. But this last prayer, it's called the invocation of the name of God. And it's found everywhere. I've studied all the different traditions to see that they all have a tradition of doing this. Some of them have lost it and don't do it anymore. But it's still, you find it if you go back to the ancient times. Catholics. Oh yeah, it's there. Yeah. Yeah. They call it some of them call it the prayer of the heart, or they call it the prayer of Jesus. And they just repeat the name of Jesus. Or the rosary too. Think about the rosary. It's repeating again and again. You're repeating this line, God have mercy on me, a sinner. And they just repeat that again and again. But this idea of bring your mercy into my heart is the same thing. It's repetitive. You just repeat again and again and again.
But the cool thing about the mantra is there's supposed to be a real vibration to it, the words that shift you.
Yeah.
It's more than words.
Yeah.
It's ancient vibrational names of God that are supposed to raise your consciousness.
Right. Right, and it's universal. It's there in other places too. Just like the Sufis, again, they chant Ah ilaha illallah, Ah ilaha illallah. They have beads, and it's just the name of Allah, the all-powerful one, you know. And so the Buddhists also have their chants.
So basically, it's bringing you into alignment.
Yes. But specifically, the Krishna chant is so beautiful and so powerful because it's this prayer that, Krishna, please engage me in your loving service. It's wanting nothing else but that. And so it goes directly to what the essence of living. Yeah. Yeah, because other prayers, other mantras can mean different things. Yeah.
It just gets so
Yes,
cool.
yes.
I
Exactly.
You should hear, I was telling Leslie, Krishna Das chanting the Maha mantra is so beautiful.
So,
It just starts to feel so good.
yeah, you can really absorb yourself in the Hare Krishna mantra, and all of these things will be revealed within your heart. Because we're not in contact with the Spirit, we have to learn and understand and just meditate on some of the ideas. But these things come more and more the more we connect to the chanting Krishna's name. So we're going to end here. And you're welcome to keep these just for your own reflection. Well, this was a small group, but I'm so grateful, and this was beautiful. Thank you for coming, and appreciate your...